Hello, and good morning. Wow, this is turning out to be a great day. We are in our eighth session for our conference this week, and I hope that you've got some great information so far. I'm Tammy McNeil. I am an assistant professor at Bennett College in Greensboro, North Carolina. I teach in the Business, Economics, and Entrepreneurship department. I'm also the oversight professor for our ambassador, financial literacy ambassador program that we do and partner with Mr. Daniels and his group. So I'm excited today to bring to you two speakers that will talk to us for our session today a little bit about financial well-being and giving us some toolkits and information on financial empathy. Our first guest that we'll have speaking is Dr. Timmy Jorgensen. She is an assistant professor and the director of the Financial Education and Wellbeing program at the college, American College of Financial Services, where she joined the faculty in June of 2020. Her research focuses on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the financial services and the financial well-being and empowerment area. She has spoken as a speaker on different panelists. She's been a contributor on topics of creating a more inclusive and empowering financial services profession. She has also spoken at conferences, on radio shows, and has spoken to several hundred couples, married couples, as well as single parents on the topic of financial literacy. She is passionate about making financial planning a more approachable and empowering topic for all of American households. So Dr. Jurgensen will be giving us some information here shortly. Our second speaker is Ms. Leah Davis. She is the founder of Leah Davis Coaching, and she is a dedicated wealth and wellness coach for women of color, and she is committed to helping her clients achieve economic stability. Ms. Davis has a profound awareness of unique challenges that women of color experience as they transform their wealth legacy. She is also a certified domestic violence advocate and brings a healing approach to her work. She understands the complexities of gender-based violence, as well as addiction, substance abuse, and recovery. Ms. Davis creates a safe space for her clients to feel seen and to be heard as she guides them towards wealth building. So today I want to welcome our two experts in their topic today. And before we continue, if you have questions, please don't forget to put them in the chat, and we will cover those at the end of their presentation. At this time, I'd like to go ahead and bring Dr. Jurgensen forward and have her to talk about her topic. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Ferguson.
Good morning, and thank you so much for having me. It is an absolute pleasure to be here with you today. I am an advocate for financial education and empowerment, so I'm very excited to be here with you today. I do have some slides that will be shared after the conference, but I'm going to just kind of share with you today a little bit about my research, as well as give you some takeaways, that what I call the financial well-being toolkit. So just to do a little background on the research part. So my research specifically is on an intersectional analysis of a model that I developed called the Inclusive Financial Wellbeing and Empowerment Model. So it's a mouthful. Why an intersectional analysis, and what is an intersectional analysis? So intersectionality is it's a research tool used to better understand the complexity of our lived experiences. So you can think about it as intersectionality came about because we understand that we have several layers of social influence that impact our lived experience and our life. So I don't just experience the world as a woman. I don't just experience the world as a white person. I experience the world as a white woman. And that gives me a very specific and intersectional sort of life view. It colors how I interact with the world, but also how the world interacts with me. So as I got into being a researcher, I started to notice in all of these financial education and financial well-being research papers, they would control for race or control for gender. And I was always a little bit troubled by that concept of controlling for it, because the reality is when I walk into a bank or when I walk in to talk to a financial advisor, I can't control for it, right? So unless I wear a very convincing Scooby-Doo mask, I will always be myself. And that will influence how people treat me, what kind of information I receive. And this is not necessarily an issue for me because I exist in this world, particularly in the United States, from a place of privilege. So it may not be something that really colors my experience quite as much. But what we do know about living in the United States is not everybody exists in a place of privilege. So the other reason that intersectionality was very intriguing to me is because generally when you pick one aspect of a person's identity to examine from a research point of view, you either choose gender or you choose race or ethnicity. The issue there is if I choose gender, it's skewed towards white women. We have more data on white women. So the experiences of women of color get largely ignored or go unexamined. The same thing happens if we look at something through just the lens of race. So if I look just at race, then I can say this is the experience of Asians. Well, the reality is it's very different to be an Asian man than to be an Asian woman. So again, what happens predominantly is that the experiences of women, particularly the experiences of women of color, are largely unwritten, unresearched, and untold inside of financial literacy, education, and well-being research. So I really wanted to understand, what does that look like? What can we know? How can we know more about this demographic? And aside from just the basic truth that all people deserve to be able to share their story and to be heard and to be seen and to be treated with respect, our country is changing, right? So we know that by I believe the year is 2045, we'll be a minority majority country, meaning the majority of citizens in our country will identify as Black, Indigenous, or persons of color. This is really critical and important for us to understand because the dynamics within the race differences also impact who makes the money, who makes the financial decisions. And so we know, particularly in the Black community, it's close to 80% of households have either a equal breadwinner that is a woman or a primary breadwinner that is a woman. So if we continue to ignore these stories of BIPOC women, we're going to go into the future very unprepared for what they expect or need from the financial services, financial education kind of space. So my research specifically looked at 10 unique identities. So I looked at Indigenous, Black, Hispanic, Asian, and white individuals, women and men. So there's 5 race and ethnicity categories, 2 gender categories, which I realize, again, is not entirely representative, but it was the best I could do given the data that I had. And it still gave us this very rich information kind of collective to learn from. So for the purposes of my research, financial well-being, I went off the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau's definition. And that definition says, financial well-being is a state of being wherein a person can fully meet current and ongoing financial obligations, can feel secure in their financial future, and is able to make choices that allow them to enjoy life. So for me, I had a really hard time finding a theory or a model within the financial services space that took into account all of the things that we know impact financial well-being. part of that is financial well-being is a very inclusive, holistic kind of view. So when you start to think about what do you need to measure to kind of that can impact that, the list gets pretty long, pretty fast. And it was an extensive list of variables that we looked at, ended up being included in this model. But when you look in inclusivity research, we find that there are generally 3 domains. So we call it like this nested model. And so if you can imagine like circles, so there's a small, a medium, and a large circle. And the smallest circle is access. So at the very center of the inclusive financial well-being and empowerment model is access. So you have to have access to begin with. Before you can do anything with your money, you have to have access to, first of all, financial knowledge, financial education. Like you have to know the information before you can use it. You have to have access to banking. So it would be like a checking, a savings account. You need access to borrowing, so credit. And you need, and in that access, I also considered protection against income shocks or a regular income. So are you able to regularly pay for things and not have a shortfall? The second kind of domain is actions. So we have access to financial services, and then your actions, that's like how the individual acts and how they behave with their money once they have access. So what are the earning behaviors? What are the spending behaviors? What are the saving behaviors and the planning behaviors? So those are the 4 kind of subgroups within that action domain. Again, earning, spending, saving, and planning. And then the largest domain is affect, which really breaks down into how you think and feel about your money. So this has to do with how you perceive yourself with money and how stressed you are. So stress, financial confidence, all of those things are included. So I really had 2 questions when I went into this. I've got all of this information, all of these individual identities. I want to understand first, what is universal about money? So is there a commonality? If we look at the whole population, are there things that come through as being basically true for everyone? And if those things, if we can find some of the variables that are predictive of financial wellness for the entire population, that's good, because that gives us some basis of understanding what do we need to address with everyone, and how can we all kind of come together and see this as people, right? How does this impact people? And then the second thing I wanted to understand is what's different. So is there divergence among these groups? And if so, what is it? And how different are the groups, right? Are they predominantly the same? Are they different? What does that look like? So as a quick aside, I used the 2018 National Financial Capability Study. So this is about my data. It's commissioned by FINRA and collected by a research company called ARC Research. So this collects nationally representative. So it mimics the US Census demographic benchmarks. So what that means is once they reach saturation on one group based on their national representation within the overall population, they stop sampling that group and they continue to seek out and sample underrepresented groups so that they get an accurate read kind of how the country is broken down. It's an online survey, and I ended up with a pretty decent sample of all 10 of my identities, as well as an overall population that was 41% male and about 52% female. So, which doesn't equal 100%. There were some who chose not to identify as male or female, so those were not included in the overall sample. So some other things that we considered were age, marital status, income, education, and risk tolerance. So the reason we included those are outside of our dimensions, are because those are things that we know impact financial behavior and financial situations. So we wanted to kind of control for socioeconomic status so that we could really understand what does this identity mean. And it was fascinating, to say the least. So a couple of key, just kind of big takeaways. So we looked at access, actions, and affect. And what we saw was there was a huge discrepancy in access. So what that tells us, what that tells me as a researcher is something that's not going to be news to any of you, but it just solidifies the reality in our country that who you are based on your race, ethnicity, and gender largely influences how you are marketed to, what kind of products and services are made readily available to you. So much like we know is the case based on banking deserts and other information about being unbanked and underbanked, we saw that communities of color had significantly lower rates of access. And when you took that into account, this was another fascinating finding that I was not necessarily surprised by as a researcher of people and behavior, but I was so excited to see this bear out in the data, is that there was very, very little difference in action. So the old adage that people do the best they can with what they have bears out in the data. So what we see is that access, there's like basically a bunch of different graphs that show us some groups have basically no access and some groups have universal access to financial services. And not surprisingly, although still tragically and something that we hope to fix, communities of color have very limited access in general to financial services, financial information, and white communities and Asian Americans had basically universal access, particularly men, so Asian men and white men. The really interesting third dimension, which is affect, so how we think and feel, the graph was all over the place. So what that tells me is affect, the way we think and feel, although influenced by our access and our behavior, is a largely individual pursuit. So that means this is something that has to be dealt with one-on-one. Much of like what Leah will discuss with us, this is an individual journey. It's an individual process of work. So finding yourself in a place of financial well-being is not an accidental happenstance, right? It does actually take some work. And regardless of how much access we have, so whether we have very little or ubiquitous access, we can find ways to help improve financial well-being. All right, so when looking at the universality of money, so we got all the data back, it shook out, and what we can see very clearly is there is a universal thread throughout the population overall, and that was stress. So unfortunately, but somewhat unsurprisingly, the thing that we all share in common around money is that money can be very stressful. So for most Americans, if you want to improve financial well-being, you can talk to people about ways to reduce their financial stress and ways to improve their financial confidence or financial satisfaction. So by simply reducing financial stress, and this is, again, I'm a math nerd, so forgive all of the math analogies that I may pull into this. I think this a little bit like an equation. And if you're going to balance the equation and you have your objective financial situation, so how much money you have, all the bills you need to pay, like your life, plus how you think and feel about it, and that equals your financial well-being. Well, if you're not in a position to immediately change your objective financial situation, the only other variable that you have control over is how you think and feel about your money. Amazingly, changing that variable can absolutely change your reality. So changing the way that you think and feel about money is something you can walk people through today. It doesn't cost them anything, right? Except for some effort and some time. Even for yourself, changing the way that you think and feel about your financial situation is the key to arriving at financial well-being. So financial well-being, I always say this, right? It starts in your head, not in your bank account. You have to start by thinking and feeling differently about your financial situation if you really want to arrive at financial well-being, because we know the money alone is not enough to get people there. So thousands of data points have shown us that just having money is not necessarily a solution for financial well-being. The other thing that we saw is all 10 identities had unique predictors of financial well-being. So again, this shows us that how we experience the world and how the world interacts with us does in fact influence the way that we think and feel about our money. It influences how we interact with our financial situation, and it even influences what type of access we're granted to the financial services and financial education world. So I had printed out this all of the different predictors by race and gender and intersectional identity. And when I got this, this was like research, dynamite. So I have this paper that's like completely cobblestone together, all of these relationships that I could see based on race, based on gender, based on ethnicity. And so there are some things that were linked based on gender, some things that were linked based on race. And what that tells us is, again, it's not necessarily surprising, but it does reinforce the basis of financial socialization, which is the idea that who we are different. It influences the way that we're socialized with money. So what girls are socialized different than little boys are. Our race or our culture does influence how we're taught about money, what kinds of things we're discussed around the household, whether there's high levels of trust or low levels of trust, the sort of things that we're exposed to. And so that bears out in these findings that we see that there are clear cultural lines. So based on the culture of our families of origin, we see that actually does impact the way that people are experiencing their financial life. All right, so we're going to dive into just a few of the differences, a few of the little key points of research nuggets that came out from this, and then we'll go dive into the financial well-being toolkit portion. So first is stress versus confidence. So there were only 4 identities out of 10. So 6 financial stress was predictive, and for the 4 that financial stress was not predictive of financial well-being, financial confidence was. So what that tells us is, even for people who do not find themselves incredibly stressed about financial well-being or incredibly stressed about their finances, their financial confidence predicts their level of financial well-being. So either reducing stress or improving confidence will, in 100% of situations, help improve someone's financial well-being. Based on the research, obviously you've got to be with the people then and figure out what they need. But the 4 groups that did not experience financial stress as a predictor were Black and Asian women and Indigenous men and women. And so there's lots that could go into this, but I think the thing to take away from this is, even for people who find themselves as being very resilient, they still may lack the confidence to really be able to take control of their situation. So we might find ourselves where stress isn't really the word that describes what we're experiencing, but we can still have somebody, a financial educator or a financial coach, that can come into our life and influence the way that we feel in a positive manner and can help us improve our financial well-being. The second big takeaway was that access predicts behavior more than people give us credit for. So what I mean by that is, when we looked at there were a very few points where the behavior of specific identities was significantly different from the overall group. And those groups whose behavior seemed significantly different experienced the largest divergence in access. So again, this reinforces the importance of having access to financial services, having access to financial education, just being exposed to the information, just having the opportunity to open a bank account. Those things are as predictive of someone's financial well-being. They're more predictive than just being able to say, well, they're going to make good choices or bad choices. So again, this is a systemic issue much more than it's a personal issue, which is both daunting and reassuring. From a behavioral finance standpoint, we can see that people are acting rationally based on the available choices that they have. Unfortunately, this means that we have almost a bigger task at hand of fixing some systemic issues if we really want to see change occurring for our BIPOC communities. Another interesting point was that objective financial knowledge was only predictive of financial well-being for white and Black identities. So it wasn't objective financial knowledge, meaning how many financial knowledge questions they answered correctly, just their basic financial knowledge. That was predictive of financial well-being for white women and men and for Black women and men. But it wasn't predictive of well-being for Hispanic men and women, for Asian men and women, or for Indigenous men and women, which is interesting. But again, maybe not horribly surprising. We have most of our financial education research is focused on Black and white Americans, and less research has been done into other identity groups. So it's working very well based on the people that we've been researching. So this just calls for a little bit more research on underserved populations. Another finding of our research was that for Hispanic identities, retirement savings provided a significant boost to financial well-being. So for those individuals who were saving for retirement, who were contributing to a retirement account through work, or who had their own individual retirement, even things like, have you ever tried to figure out how much you need to save for retirement? So there's that question was included as one of the variables. Any question that had to do with retirement turned out to be significant for Hispanic populations. So that tells us that retirement savings provide a huge well-being boost for Hispanic communities. So that saving for the future, kind of holistic long-term planning mindset is a culturally based, important predictor of well-being. So focusing on that and figuring out small ways to make those contributions and to get that additional contribution from an employer can make a huge difference in how somebody feels about their financial situation and whether or not they're satisfied with what they're doing. And it can really have a ripple effect. All right. There were a few trends that were specific to women. So independent of race or ethnicity, but that were common along gender lines, again, reinforcing the idea of financial socialization. And those were investing outside of retirement and regularly contributing to retirement savings. Those were significantly predictive exclusively for women. So encouraging retirement savings and accessing sort of that future mindset and getting women to latch on to the idea that they need to take care of themselves in the future, and that doing so is an act of sort of radical self-love, but also is a way to take care of your family by making sure that you don't become a burden on your kids or other people in your support group if you can take care of yourself in the future. We also know that breaking into the investment landscape is more difficult for women, and women tend to invest later, invest smaller amounts, and see slower growth on those investments. So getting women invested early has a huge boon to their financial well-being. Okay. So now for the toolkit. So there are three G's of this financial well-being toolkit. So the first is global thinking. The second is grace. And the third is gratitude. So we're going to go through each of them, and I'm going to talk about how the research kind of plays into this, and then how just my own experience and qualitative experiences over my career have helped me arrive at these things. So first is global thinking. So something that I see all the time when talking with people about their financial situations, particularly their financial missteps, is there's a very myopic view of what I did to mess up the situation and how I did something wrong. And I kind of, you want them to step back and give you the whole story, give you all the information. So one of the first things I ask is, can you give me an inventory of the entire situation? So sort of walk me through everything that was happening leading up to the decision, and help me understand everything that was going on. This can include, so an example might be, I keep overspending on my eating out budget. And no matter how much I try, I can't seem to break this habit of eating out. Well, if you can have them step back and take an inventory of the entire situation, you can maybe start to see trends and recognize things that where their circumstances are overpowering their ability to choose. So, for example, I had a client who had the same experience, a financial coaching client, and she's very frustrated because she seemed to always be overspending on her eating out budget. And we came to the conclusion that it wasn't actually, it wasn't something that was likely going to change. So she found herself in a situation where she really, she had to stay late one day a week at the office, and there was not another opportunity for her to bring food or have a refrigerator or even have the time to prepare food that she had brought. So she would order food in because she still had several hours to be there in the office. So in that situation, you do have a choice, but you also have a circumstance. So recognizing the restraints of both the circumstance and the choice, the decision was made to just increase her food budget, right? Like increase your allowance for eating out and cut back somewhere else that makes more sense and is a sustainable choice for you, because the likelihood that you're not going to be hungry that one day a week or that you're not going to need food is zero. You're a person, you're going to be hungry. That's just how it's going to go. So by kind of thinking globally, we were able to step back from the situation and consider what's the circumstance, what's a choice, and which one do you have more control over changing? Because sometimes you do have more control to change yourself, change the circumstance, remove yourself from that situation. And other times you have more power to change the choice. But if you make sustainable plans for going forward based on real life, rather than on your ideal situation, you're more likely to see success. The second thing, the second tool in our toolkit is grace. So mastering the skill of mindfulness, of forgiveness, and we call it in our house a do-over. So mindfulness, again, means being very mindful of the words that you're using and how you're thinking about yourself and what you're repeating about yourself. So having some grace and being a little bit more forgiving, you may recognize, and again, this isn't a cop-out. So this doesn't mean that you're always like, everything is fine and I don't ever have to budget, and no matter what I do with my money, it's all rainbows and butterflies. But rather, it's taking this pragmatic approach and understanding mindfully, that was something that I did with my money that I don't feel great about. It didn't align with my values and my goals. And I don't want to repeat that behavior. So taking the shame out of it and just recognizing the behavior for what it is, forgiving yourself for past mistakes. So saying like, I understand that I don't own a DeLorean and I can't go back in time like on Back to the Future. So I'm just going to have to forgive myself and move forward. And then the do-over, make a plan right then of what you're going to do if you find yourself in a similar situation, or make a plan on how you're going to avoid that situation or that trigger. So if you find that every time you go out with your friends, you overspend on eating out, then maybe change the situation so that your friends come in and everybody brings something to eat with them. If you can get yourself to kind of give yourself some grace so that you can move past just the issue towards a solution. The second the second part of this grace toolkit tool is really actually practicing kindness to yourself. So the language that we use with ourselves is so critically important. Also, the way that we talk about our own situation with others is very important. Sharing our story without shame, with kindness to ourselves, but with resolve to do better in the future is such a powerful tool for those that are around us, particularly when you are the financial educator, when you are the financial professor, when you are an advisor, a whatever it is, whatever your position of power is that you embody in your circle of influence. People are watching and listening listening to what you say. So as well as I'm a parent, and so I know that this is absolutely true. Your children will learn how they think and feel about money largely from you. So being very mindful to be kind to yourself, to speak about your behavior without shame, but with resolve on how you're going to do better. That's really empowering. That shows people that I am not my mistakes. I can and will move forward. And my missteps do not define my self-worth. So I can give myself some grace and move forward and have that positive outlook. And you'll watch that sentiment will really remove a lot of the anxiety, a lot of the stress from those situations that you might have otherwise found stressful. And this skill can be practiced not just when it comes to money, but when it comes to everything. So you can start to implement these sort of global thinking and grace in all aspects of your life. All right. So the final toolkit piece, the final tool in our toolkit is gratitude. So I'm going to have you role play with me just for a moment. And I know that I can't hear you or see you, so I'm going to just ask you to play along. So I'm going to have you close your eyes and imagine as you're getting ready for bed tonight, the big financial pain point in your life. Just kind of bring that to the forefront of your mind. Whatever this big financial issue is that you're struggling with right now, it may not be huge, but the thing that kind of keeps that nagging issue. When you fall asleep tonight, a miracle happens, and that financial situation is completely resolved. It doesn't really matter what the miracle is, but when you wake up tomorrow, you instantly know that this issue is no longer there, and you're free from this financial stressor. So the question is, what do you do with your day tomorrow? What do you do? And let's pretend tomorrow's a Saturday so you don't have to work. What do you do with your day? What do you do now that you don't have that financial stressor? So we've done this question with hundreds of individuals, so couples and single parents, and in private financial coaching sessions. I always just am interested because this really kind of brings out what people really value and what they're in many situations, what they're putting off because of the financial stress in their life. And the most common responses that I get are pray, say a prayer of gratitude because it's a miracle, dance in the kitchen, sleep in, go for a walk in nature, call a friend or a loved one and just chat with them, cook at home, like work on a hobby that I've been neglecting, go for a drive in the car, turn up the radio and like listen to my favorite music. So all of these things come through, just these things that bring people joy. And for the most part, 95% of the answers are free. They're free things that people can be doing anyway. And they're things that people are holding themselves back from because they feel like they got to get their financial life in order. So not that I'm encouraging anyone not to get their financial life in order, but I do want you to put your financial stress in its place. And gratitude is a great way to do that. So take stock of what's going well in your life. Think of 3 things that are going well in your life that have nothing to do with money, and think of 3 things that are going well in your life that do have to do with money. And I started this exercise when I was in grad school, and a lot of my 3 financial things that were going well were future oriented because not a lot was going well for me in grad school when it came to finances. So it would be like things like, I'm 1 semester closer to graduating from graduate school, which will secure a higher income for myself and my family and allow me to do the things that I want to do with money. So whatever that looks like for you, but just be intentional about taking the time to notice and celebrate your financial wins. So you could say something like, I'm so grateful that my credit score bumped by 5 points when I checked it this last time because of that extra payment that I made on that card. Whatever. Gratitude is this incredibly powerful tool that allows us to experience joy regardless of our circumstances. And that really is the power. That's where you're going to find the internal power to overcome financial stress. Your life is not dictated by financial stress unless you give it the power to do so. So take that power back and recognize that all the goodness in your life is not dependent on your financial situation. There are plenty of things about your life that are wonderful and fantastic, awesome, that are happening outside of your financial circumstance, and be intentional about expressing gratitude for those things. Even calling people or sending a text or sending a quick message over social media to somebody and saying, hey, I'm just really grateful for our friendship. I was thinking about you today. I'm so grateful that you're in my life. Whatever that is, this trains our brain to look for the positive outcomes in our life. And it helps us to recognize where our financial situation, where the power in our financial situation stops and where the power of our life kind of takes over. So that's everything that I have for you. So I hope that you found those financial toolkit tools helpful. And again, I'll share this out with SFE and PD, so it may be available after the conference as an additional resource if anyone is interested. But thank you so much again for having me.
Thank you so much, Timmy, for that valuable information that you shared. But if you heard yourself being described, I completely understand, because as Timmy was this information provided, I'm thinking, check that box, that was me. As an educator, being able to talk and share with potential clients or those we serve a little bit about with confidence. If I had heard Timmy say that about 10 years ago, I was a financial advisor at the time, and I definitely did not have the ability. And I was meeting with clients at that time, feeling so small. So I'm with you, so you can get an understanding about my journey and how I've learned to have financial empathy for myself, for the women that I serve, and that I coach. So I'm from Northern California. I was a stay-at-home mom. I have 2 older siblings. We did not have a lot of money growing up. There was definitely no setting, not even conversations about going to college. There was nothing about in a household where I didn't know anything. My parents didn't know either. It was given. When it was raining, my dad wasn't working. There wasn't money coming in. But when it was spring and summer, we had money. It's all great. And then when it's not there, it is domestic violence. So I grew up in a home where I didn't know what to expect in my life. I didn't know what kind of mood my father was going to be in. I didn't know all of that upheaval in our families as well. So later on in life, when I was a young, and I'm seeing these individuals like driving nice cars. And I got this since I was 19 years old. I had no idea what was going on, how to navigate this world that had something, and they walked, they had their suitcases, they had their cars, they had these careers. I started looking into like, what is this? What do they have that I don't have? And I just decided they've got money. So how am I going to get money? What can I do? So I was really promoted into other levels. I was an executive assistant, then I was an office manager, and I was making good money, still broke. And I didn't know what the heck was going on. So I'm just going to get a career and I'm going to learn about money. So I was approached, actually. I was looking for work. Oh, financial advisor, I could become that. I just got to study and pass these exams. Let me go ahead and sit down. I'm going to study right now. So I just sat down and I'm thrown into the career of being a financial advisor. So I've got all this information to these financial products and things, right? So I had access to that, but these exams, and I got great information. But at the same time, it was just like, and so when I was going into these appointments and in these meetings, seeing something here, don't know if my connection or not, but you seem to be muted. I think I'm okay. Let me know if I'm being muted. I eventually learned, and what I was realizing when I would feel so small, and I just knew because there were just in alignment with what I was trying to accomplish, and I didn't know why. I had these behaviors, and so I was going in to meet with these clients, and I just went. A connection seems to be okay. Good. So apologize here. I'm checking on my connection. What I ended up doing was just realizing that I'm in these situations with clients. I'm feeling imposter. I just felt like I was an imposter. Like everything that I'm doing, I have all this information. I am, and it wasn't until a few years later when I had left. I was also on time, which makes sense because when you're a child and there's domestic violence, emotional and verbal abuse and things of that nature. So when I got healing myself from within and really looking into my experience as a child and looking into what was it why did I feel like I just wasn't good, that I had it all together, but in the inside I it wasn't adding up. And what I learned in my journey, my childhood, and looking into it is I learned that I didn't even know, we got to be kind to ourselves and hear the things that we say to ourselves. There's one thing I do know with my therapist, that it wasn't that I was hearing this negative talk. Like sometimes people can be saying something negative. I wasn't, oh, 1 second. I'll turn my camera off. Let me know if this is better. Hopefully that's better for all of you. If you can, looks like there's seems to be some bad connection here. Sorry about that. Okay, again, healing from my experiences in life and just really looking to find off. And what I learned through therapy was that it wasn't that I was hearing particular experiencing. So I would feel feel it in my body. I would feel like tightness in my stomach. A clue right then that I was experiencing something where, it was what I learned though later on as I became a domestic violence advocate, all this made sense. Why I experienced all these emotions when it came to dealing with my money, when it came to really be the source of inspiration and motivation. I didn't even feel it within myself. So I began to learning how to be kind to myself. I began to listen to things that I was and to have empathy for myself, and that empathy then translated into having this finance of my environment. The only reason I didn't know about audit, and even though I'd gotten all this knowledge and information as a financial advisor and passed these exams, because I was operating from a place of fear and scarcity my whole life, that Timmy was talking about as well. Begin having some mindful practices and begin to central nervous system. And when I was in these moments of state of fight, flight, freeze, working on my finances, I began to learn how to navigate through that. And now that translates into my work with the clients that I have, with the women that I serve, one of the women that I serve, they have experienced some sort of trauma in their life. And so when I'm aware of hearing the words that they use, the things that they say, when they're talking about recently, she is trying to start her own childcare business, that, she can't seem to just sit down for that orientation, and it's only an hour long and on a Thursday. She keeps saying she's going to sit down, but by the time that Thursday rolls up, she just does something else. I was hearing her tone go down, and I was listening to the words she was saying. And so time this happened and walked me through the day and explained to me just, moment by moment, or when you decided not to do the orientation to start your business, what the experience was. So she was saying, so I heard her saying things such as, I should have done this already. I had to get that done because I should have washed the dishes already today, but the baby needs to be fed. And she was going through all these should haves. I need to. And so I'm listening. When it was time for me to speak, I heard her. I read back to her the different statements that she was saying. And she paused and she said, I don't feel really good. And I said, okay, so now to me, the things that she was saying to herself. And I asked her, I said, where does this come from? I'm supposed to do all of this because that's how I was raised. She was the oldest of all her siblings and was taught to have more discipline. And she needed to do X, Y, and Z. And by the time it came to, I said, when you hear yourself say this, do you feel, what do you feel like? She said, I don't feel motivated. Why don't we work on experiencing something different? I said, has this been working for you? And she said, no. I can say that can shift your energy. And also, we talked about how to work on being more kind to herself, because she realized the words that she was using, she was not being kind to herself. And so she wanted to stop that behavior. And so once we began that session, I'm choosing to use this time right now to experience freedom, because what she sat down and finished this orientation and started her business. And the reason she wanted to increase her income is that so she could experience more freedom. And so put freedom in there. So for example, she bought a planner, and she kept putting in her planner. She was going to sit down, came up with the plan. She would put the planner somewhere where she would see it, which is on her baby's changing table. It's like, oh, I feel lousy. I can't stand that planner because I'm not even using it. And I said, okay, well, we're going to shift that in her baby's changing table. And we came up with together that every time she looked at that planner, and she would say, you know, I'm choosing this key to freedom because this is my avenue to go from there. That worked out. The next time that we met, she let me know that she did use the orientation because she realized, and the words that she was saying, she began saying, I am choosing for myself and my family. So she began to shift this energy. Now realizes that she has the ability and the power to have that empathy for herself in hearing the things that she's speaking with, the things she wants to accomplish. She didn't realize before that the words she was using was holding her back. I know that early on in my career, like I said, 10 years ago as a financial advisor, didn't have the financial empathy for myself. I didn't recognize that the situation it was a product of my childhood, right? And with this, I give myself this grace. I recognize and understand, like, yes, there are things that mistakes that I made financially, kind of messed me up. And you know what, though? That's okay, because for something that you can take away with is on this journey of learning something new. As a baby, I said, you know, one of the ways we can really have empathy for ourselves is we're learning. When this baby is learning, think if you have children or think of yourself or a little baby as learning to walk, as just berate that baby, saying, oh, you idiot, get up. You know better than that. You do that. Most parents in this world will help the baby up, say some this, you know, and really have that empathy for them learning to walk. And they're going to fall for our clients where they're learning how to walk. We're learning this new way of being. We're learning how to that we catch where we're judging ourselves and we're saying things that really are aim and judgment. We can learn to let that go. We can learn to do that by pausing, going still, going within, and really connecting with our true inner self. Serve. And when we take care of ourselves, and when we forgive ourselves, and we have this grace, and then when we heal from that, then we can definitely speak without answers or things that we've experienced in life, so that creates that pathway, that empathy comes in them. And that's where the beauty of shifting this energy and creating that economic empowerment. So that's what I have. I hope you all heard me today. So I just wanted to go ahead, I guess this time, hand it over to our moderator and possibly.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think what we've got out of this today has been really exciting, great information. Sometimes we do hold ourselves to a different light and we won't forgive ourselves. And so I think by you all telling us it's okay to forgive and to have grace and to give yourself empathy, I think that's an awesome lesson that we've learned today. We do apologize for any connection issues that some of you may have experienced in this session, but we're glad you're still here. If you have questions, please put those in the chat. And as you do those, I will go ahead and ask a couple of questions that I received and I have. So this question is for Leah. This question is for you. Could you tell us how has financial empathy enhanced other areas of your life?
Thank you so much for that great question. And so, having this empathy and you see my family's lived experience a lot differently, and for people in the world, really, that we're all human. So empathy and recognizing for myself that I didn't have it all together, and we all must protect ourselves, especially if we've experienced some sort of trauma in our life. And so just really recognizing personally and professionally, and then just being able to step back and I'm not perfect at it. I've got my moments of just recognizing what someone may face for them to feel seen and heard.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, let me go ahead and throw that question to you as well, Dr. Jurgensen. Could you say how that has helped you in other areas?
Absolutely. So one thing that I think is that I've recognized as I've been in the financial services industry is like Leah, I had a couple of years as a financial advisor, and it was not for me. It was really hard. And having some empathy for my own situation, right? For just recognizing my circumstances and my own needs and being willing to take care of myself and still stay in this industry. So um, having financial empathy, I think, is such a powerful tool to be able to help us navigate our own situation and do what's really best for us. So for me, that meant the feast or famine lifestyle of being an advisor was not going to work for me, because I had a very similar childhood experience to Leah on the sometimes we had a lot and sometimes we had nothing. And I couldn't healthily operate in that sort of scarcity space. So that helped me say, you know what? I love financial services. I'm going to need to find a career where I get paid and I know how much money I'm making and I can take care of my family and feel safe, because that's really, really important to me. And then I can go there with I can bravely go and do the thing that's going to be best for me. And I don't have to be ashamed of what I need or of pursuing the things that are going to be, most beneficial for me and my family. And I find this, especially with women in financial services, I find a lot of women who get burnt out and just leave because they think there's something wrong with me that I cannot be successful in this industry. When really it's that the industry is not responding with what they need to be successful as an individual. And so if you aren't offered that, like, it's okay to have that empathy for yourself and say, I'm going to seek out exactly what it is that I need. So exactly the stability, exactly the salary, exactly the freedom, whatever that is. And to kind of pursue that unashamed of what that means for how you're going to, because the industry is going to have to respond. And that's another thing. This isn't something where people have to figure out how to work with a broken industry. The industry is also evolving. And so the more people we can keep in the industry, the faster we're going to be able to change and evolve to meet the demands of the future landscape. So
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. So my next question, again, if you have questions, put those in the chat. My next question I have is for you, Timmy. So the question comes from an individual who says, when you have spoken or worked with families about financial literacy, what were some of the changes that they reported? Was those significant changes, or what happened with those families?
Yeah, a lot of the things that were the most significant, maybe financial changes, were just people recognizing opportunities and options that they didn't know were previously available to them. So one of the most frequent changes was people refinancing debt. So if they had used maybe a payday loan or a title loan center, just being able to expose them to other options. I live in Georgia, and so in Georgia, within our community, we have a nonprofit company that refinances loans that are predatory at a competitive rate. So they could get out of something that was like 300% interest, maybe 400% interest, into something that was 2 or 3% interest, and they could actually pay it off. Also, people taking advantage of their employer benefits. That was another huge contributing factor that I saw in the stress level. Was I have this really easy option, and it's open enrollment season right now, so this is a great but people just really taking the time to like read their benefits package, to be mindful about what kind of health coverage they needed for their family, what kind of risks they were willing to take on themselves. So those were usually just people feeling confident in the choices that they had been making, and that they could change kind of little things. My favorite other activity for people that are savers, that were really like to be savers, is having them calculate how much they were actually saving. So what percentage of their income were they saving, and including their employer contributions in that, where people would say, I feel like I'm not saving anything. And we'd get in and they'd be saving 15% of their income. And they wouldn't even know that they were saving 15% of their income.
Right.
So those were kind of big takeaways. The other thing was really just changing the dynamic of the way that people talked about money with each other, and helping couples find a routine that worked for them. And for some couples, that meant we don't talk about money except when we're talking about, like, we agree it's a non-topic because we got to be settled. One of us really has to be dialed in. So but just being able to set up some rules that work. And I think that's the trick, is like, it has to be sustainable. It has to be realistic for you and for your situation and your family.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. I enjoy those activities. I know when I closed my eyes, I was like, oh my gosh, what is it for me that I wish that I could get rid of tomorrow when I wake up? And I think that was a great eye-opening activity for me, because there is one thing that I just really wish would go away. And so that helped me a lot. So this question then, I guess, is for both of you. How can a person, someone begin their own personal, I guess, journey in financial empathy? How can someone begin their own personal journey?
Leah, do you want to start?
Yeah, that's a great question. Sure, absolutely. Really begins with just kind of looking back at your own history, and paying attention to those things that where you feel family, or the situation that you were in, and from to working with a professional to support you with that, whether it's a therapist doing therapy, or because then at that point you can also learn to be mindful, forgiveness, of self-love, self-compassion, and working on that. And it doesn't have to take a super long time either. I mean, into experience of love. And that can happen in moments. It doesn't have to be this huge, small wins, just like we have with our clients, right? We can do it for ourselves. Celebrate the small wins a long way.
Thank you. Timmy?
Yeah, totally echo Leah. It's a small steps to big outcomes kind of a journey. So being mindful and recognizing what kind of things you're thinking and saying about your situation, is probably one of the beginning steps, is just recognizing kind of what your habits are currently. And also, I'm a very visual person, so I like to actually like put together a visual old school collage. How do I want to think and feel about my money? How do I want to think and feel? Like in 5 years, what am I celebrating? Whatever it is that however visualizing that is going to go for you, giving your brain a direction is a really powerful tool to kind of help yourself move forward and see some progress. The other thing is to kind of have a partner in this. So ask a girlfriend, ask a guy friend, ask your mom or your auntie or your cousin or whoever it is, a coworker. Say, I'm really working on being more empathetic with myself or whatever. Can you help me? Like almost like a book club, right? So somebody that you can check in with and see how you're doing, or text. It's that collaboration, that sharing. Everybody deals with money. Everybody, every adult you see deals with money. So we also don't reserve a lot of space in our society to talk about things like this, to talk about what they're struggling with, or to open up and save space for how to learn about it. So just making it an acceptable thing within your circle of friends and within your family to talk about, to bring it up and be able to discuss, gives people an opportunity to feel like, oh, I didn't know that I could say my car is going to break down and I'm terrified to buy another car because I don't even remember what the process is like because it's been 9 years. It's okay to talk about it, right? Like,
Right.
It's okay to bring it up and to ask questions about money. It's okay to say, I've been a renter my whole life, and at 43, I decided I want to buy a house, and I don't even know what to do. I don't know where to start because I've never done it. So I think making it okay and making it fun to talk about that kind of stuff within your circle and your family and your girlfriends, your guy friends, your coworkers, is a really, really powerful tool for normalizing, right? We sometimes we're like, I'm the only one that's ever struggled with this. This is not true. Everybody struggles.
Right. And I kind of call those my accountability partners. So I tell them, I don't want to spend but this much money this month on whatever. And if it's going out to eat or buying a new pair of shoes or something. And then if I am so excited, I call my girlfriends and say, oh, look at these. I bought these. They're like, no, what did you tell us last week that you were going to do? So they're kind of my accountability partners that make me kind of pull myself back in. So this has been great. I hope that those of you joining us have had a great opportunity to hear some advice from these experts in their fields. Was there any last thoughts or last words you all want to share with us before we end this session? Okay.
To
So
yourself.
okay. Good.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you can do this. It's totally manageable.
Thank you. Thank you. So if we could, out there in Etherland or wherever you are, Zoom land, can you please help me thank our guests today, either in the chat, give some thumbs up or some words of encouragement as we move to our next session today. I really want to thank you both for being here with us. I appreciate you having the time and spending with us and giving us the data and the information and the opportunity to hear your research and what you've done in your areas. So thank you so much. And yes, there we go. Great. Thank you so much for giving us that feedback. We look forward to you joining us on the next session. And Timmy and Leah, I appreciate it. I am excited that I was able to moderate with you today. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Bye.